Have you ever wondered what an avoidant is actually thinking once you stop reaching out? The moment you begin no contact, everything changes. The calls stop, the texts disappear, your attention, reassurance, and emotional presence are suddenly gone. From the outside, they may look perfectly fine, almost as if nothing has affected them. They seem calm, distant, or completely unbothered. But what happens beneath that composed exterior is often very different. Many people assume an avoidant simply moves on without looking back. The reality is usually much more layered than that. During no contact, they can experience a quiet emotional struggle that remains hidden from everyone around them. Beneath the silence are unspoken expectations, conflicting thoughts, and emotions they rarely acknowledge, even to themselves. Today, we're going to explore what avoidants secretly expect while you're maintaining no contact, because their internal experience is often much more complicated than it appears. To understand these expectations, it's important to recognize one key pattern. Avoidants rarely deal with difficult emotions the moment they arise. Instead of confronting emotional discomfort immediately, they tend to push it aside or disconnect from it altogether. That's why, after a breakup, they can appear unusually composed or emotionally detached. It isn't always because they feel nothing. More often, it's because emotional suppression has become their default way of coping. One of the first expectations that quietly develops during no contact is the belief that you'll eventually break the silence. This isn't necessarily driven by pride or entitlement. It's often based on the relationship dynamic that existed before. In many relationships, avoidants unconsciously create emotional distance while expecting the other person to close the gap. They become accustomed to their partner being the one who reaches out, starts conversations, repairs conflicts, or reassures the connection whenever tension appears. When you suddenly stop doing those things, the pattern is interrupted. Even if they never admit it, they notice your absence. Every day without a message, every missed opportunity for you to check in, every moment you choose not to chase them, sends a signal that something has changed. They may never mention it or react outwardly, but internally, they recognize that the usual cycle isn't happening anymore. A quiet expectation continues running in the background of their mind. Sooner or later, you'll come back. As the silence stretches on, another hidden expectation begins to take shape. Although avoidants often struggle with emotional closeness, they aren't immune to fears of abandonment. Those two fears can exist at the same time. They may distance themselves when intimacy becomes overwhelming, yet still hope the emotional bond hasn't completely disappeared. Because of that, many avoidants secretly expect that you're still emotionally invested, even while respecting the distance. They may imagine you're simply giving them space, believing that when they finally feel ready, you'll still be there exactly where they left you. In their mind, you're still emotionally available. You're still loyal to the connection. You're still quietly waiting without demanding anything from them. That belief offers a surprising sense of comfort. It allows them to feel that the relationship hasn't fully slipped away, while avoiding the pressure of immediate emotional vulnerability. They can hold on to the reassurance of your presence without having to face the discomfort of genuine intimacy. Of course, they may never express these thoughts out loud. In fact, they may convince themselves they don't need anyone at all. Yet beneath that protective exterior, there's often an assumption that you're still emotionally connected to them in some way. However, silence has a way of changing everything. As more time passes without hearing from you, their confidence in those expectations slowly begins to weaken. The longer no contact continues, the more uncertainty starts replacing certainty. Their mind begins searching for explanations, questioning assumptions, and rewriting the story they originally believed. And that's when the third hidden expectation starts to emerge. As time goes on, another quiet expectation begins to surface. Many avoidants carry deeply rooted beliefs that they aren't truly deserving of lasting love. Somewhere beneath their protective walls is the fear that if someone ever sees the real version of them, rejection is only a matter of time. That belief doesn't disappear during no contact. If anything, the silence often brings it closer to the surface. Part of them secretly hopes you'll challenge that belief. Even after creating distance, they may quietly wish you'll reach out first, fight for the relationship, or show them that they still matter to you. It's one of the greatest contradictions within avoidant behavior. They pull away to create emotional safety, yet somewhere inside, they hope another person won't be discouraged enough to walk away completely. For many avoidants, withdrawing becomes an unconscious test. Without saying a word, they wait to see who will remain, who will continue caring, and who will prove that the connection meant something. But when no contact continues, and no one comes chasing after them, their deepest insecurities can begin to feel validated. Instead of seeing your silence as healthy boundaries, they may interpret it as confirmation that they were never truly loved or valued in the first place. This inner conflict leaves them emotionally divided. On one hand, they crave reassurance. On the other, they're terrified of the vulnerability required to ask for it. That leads directly into another hidden expectation. They long for clarity without having to expose their own emotions. Deep down, they want explanations. They want to know what you're thinking, how you truly felt, why things unfolded the way they did, and whether the relationship ever genuinely mattered to you. Yet they often hope those answers will somehow appear without them having to initiate an uncomfortable conversation. Instead of asking directly, they begin looking for indirect signs. They may revisit old conversations, reread text messages, replay important moments in their mind, or quietly check your social media activity for clues about how you're doing. Every post, every absence, and every small detail can become something they analyze in an attempt to understand the situation. They're searching for answers, but they want to find them from a safe, emotional distance. Direct confrontation feels overwhelming, so they try to solve the puzzle privately, hoping the pieces will somehow come together on their own. There's another expectation that surprises many people. Some avoidants quietly hope you've changed during the period of no contact. This doesn't necessarily mean they expect you to become a different person. Instead, they imagine you've become more emotionally grounded and independent. They may picture you as calmer, more secure, and less dependent on constant reassurance than before. This expectation isn't always a reflection of something being wrong with you. More often, it reflects their own discomfort with emotional intensity. Because closeness can feel overwhelming to them, they imagine that if the relationship ever starts again, it will feel easier if both people appear more emotionally self-sufficient. In their mind, the silence has created space for growth. They may believe you've become someone who no longer places emotional pressure on them, someone who can love without making them feel trapped or overwhelmed. That possibility makes reconnecting seem safer than it once did. Yet even here, another contradiction appears. Avoidants often want to know they are still important in your life, but they don't want to feel responsible for your emotional well-being. They hope you've missed them enough to remember the connection, yet not so much that your happiness depends entirely on their presence. They want to feel valued without feeling emotionally responsible. That delicate balance allows them to experience reassurance while avoiding the pressure that commitment and emotional dependence can sometimes create. Put another way, they want to feel wanted without feeling emotionally responsible for someone else's happiness. During no contact, a question often lingers quietly in the background of their mind. Do you still think about them? Do they still occupy space in your heart? Knowing they continue to matter can reinforce their sense of value, even if they never admit that's what they're looking for. At the same time, if they sense that your emotional well-being depends entirely on them, it can trigger the very fears that caused them to withdraw in the first place. That's why this dynamic becomes so complicated. They want reassurance, but not pressure. They enjoy feeling appreciated, yet they become uncomfortable when that appreciation turns into emotional dependence. It's a delicate balance they often struggle to maintain. Another hidden expectation slowly develops as the silence continues. Despite appearing unaffected, many avoidants quietly fear the possibility of being replaced. They may act as though you've moved on and it doesn't matter to them, but internally, the thought can become surprisingly unsettling. Once communication stops, there's no longer any way to know what's happening in your life. That uncertainty allows their imagination to fill in the blanks, and imagination is often far more powerful than reality. They begin wondering whether someone new has entered your life. They question whether another person is now receiving the affection, patience, and understanding they once had, but failed to fully appreciate. Thoughts like these can begin circling through their mind. What if they've found someone who truly understands them? What if another person is giving them the emotional security I couldn't provide? What if I pushed away the one relationship that genuinely mattered? Those questions can awaken feelings they worked hard to suppress. Regret, guilt, sadness, and even anxiety may quietly surface beneath their composed exterior. Yet rather than expressing those emotions openly, many avoidants respond by becoming even more distant. They retreat further into silence because protecting themselves emotionally feels safer than admitting what they're experiencing. It's important not to mistake that silence for a lack of feeling. Very often, it's a defense mechanism rather than evidence that they never cared. For some avoidants, no contact initially carries another expectation. If the breakup involved intense emotions or unresolved conflict, they may assume the silence will become a lesson for you. They might believe you'll eventually experience the same emotional pain they felt, almost as though the distance serves as a form of justice or emotional balance. But as weeks and months pass, that mindset often begins to change. The desire for validation slowly gives way to something much more personal and vulnerable. Instead of hoping you'll suffer, they may quietly begin hoping that the connection hasn't disappeared forever. Even if they're not ready to rebuild the relationship, they find comfort in believing the possibility still exists. Simply knowing the door hasn't completely closed can become emotionally reassuring. Then there's perhaps the deepest expectation of all, one that many avoidants rarely acknowledge, even within their own thoughts. Deep inside, they often hope someone will understand them without requiring them to explain themselves. They imagine a person who sees beyond the emotional walls, the mixed signals, the periods of withdrawal, and the uncomfortable silence. Someone who recognizes that their distance isn't always rejection, but often a response to fear, vulnerability, or emotional overwhelm. In that private fantasy, love becomes effortless. The other person somehow understands what remains unspoken. They interpret silence without needing explanations. They respond with patience instead of frustration, and compassion instead of judgment. It's an idealized hope, but for many avoidants, it's an incredibly powerful one. That quiet expectation can keep an emotional connection alive long after they've insisted the relationship is over. So what should you take away from all of this? The most important lesson isn't learning how to meet every hidden expectation an avoidant may have. It's recognizing that your healing should never depend on trying to satisfy someone else's emotional patterns. Instead of shaping yourself around what an avoidant secretly hopes for, focus on becoming the version of yourself that brings you peace, confidence, and emotional security. Because the healthiest relationships aren't built on guessing someone's unspoken expectations. They're built on honesty, emotional responsibility, and two people who are willing to meet each other with openness rather than fear. The more energy you spend trying to satisfy expectations that are never spoken out loud, the easier it becomes to lose sight of your own needs. That's why no contact should never be viewed as a tactic to make someone return. Its greatest purpose is something much deeper. It's an opportunity to reconnect with yourself, rebuild your confidence, and remember your own value outside of the relationship. Something remarkable happens when you stop chasing approval. The moment you stop adjusting yourself to make another person feel comfortable, your perspective begins to change. Instead of focusing on whether they're coming back, you begin focusing on who you're becoming. That's where your real strength returns. Ironically, This is often the one outcome many avoidants never see coming. They may expect you to keep reaching out. They may expect you to remain emotionally available forever. What they often don't anticipate is that the silence transforms you. Over time, you become stronger, more grounded, and less emotionally dependent on their presence. Eventually, you no longer need constant answers from them to feel at peace. If they ever decide to reconnect, it won't be because you perfectly matched every hidden expectation they carried. More often, it's because the old relationship dynamic no longer exists. You stepped out of the familiar cycle. Instead of chasing, pleading, or trying to convince them to stay, you chose something different. You chose your own healing. Your absence wasn't fueled by anger, revenge, or the desire to punish them. It was created through self-respect. And that quiet confidence often leaves a much deeper impression than emotional reactions ever could. For perhaps the first time, they're no longer watching someone desperately trying to hold on to them. They're watching someone confidently continue forward without them. That realization can become surprisingly powerful because it forces them to confront something they never expected. That life moved forward, and so did you. If today's message resonated with your experience, remember that you don't have to face this journey by yourself. Relationships with emotionally avoidant people can leave you questioning your value, doubting your instincts, and wondering whether your needs were somehow too much. Those feelings are understandable, but they don't define your worth. The silence you've chosen isn't a sign of failure. It's the space where healing begins. Not because it changes another person, but because it changes you. And that's the transformation that truly matters. It develops each idea in greater depth, while maintaining the same core message and emotional tone. If you've ever reached the point where it felt like you were carrying the entire relationship on your shoulders, I want you to pause for a moment and remember something important. A healthy relationship should never feel like a responsibility that only one person has to maintain. Love isn't supposed to depend on one person constantly fixing problems, starting difficult conversations, making endless compromises, or sacrificing their own emotional well-being just to keep the connection alive. Relationships thrive when both people choose to show up consistently, communicate honestly, and share the emotional weight together. If you were always the one reaching out first, always trying to understand, always giving second chances, and always hoping things would eventually change, it's understandable if you now feel emotionally exhausted. That kind of imbalance can slowly convince you that if you just loved harder, became more patient, or asked for less, everything would finally work. But that's not how healthy love works. Here's something I hope you never forget. Your ability to love deeply has never been your weakness. The fact that you care deeply, communicate openly, and invest your heart into the people you love isn't something to be ashamed of. Those qualities don't make you needy. They don't make you too emotional, too sensitive, or too much. They make you human. In a world where many people protect themselves by avoiding vulnerability, your willingness to love sincerely is something valuable. The goal isn't to stop loving deeply. The goal is to give that love to people who are willing to meet you with the same honesty, effort, and emotional availability. Never allow someone else's inability to receive healthy love to convince you that your love is the problem. Your emotional openness isn't something that needs to be hidden, minimized, or apologized for. It's one of your greatest strengths. The right people won't ask you to suppress your feelings just so they can remain comfortable. They won't expect you to become emotionally smaller to fit inside their fears or limitations. The people who truly belong in your life won't see your vulnerability as a burden. They'll see it as an invitation to build something real. That is the kind of connection you deserve. If you've stayed with me until this point, I genuinely want to thank you for being here with me on Avoidant Decoded. This channel exists for people who are searching for answers after relationships that left them confused, questioning themselves, or wondering why love sometimes feels so complicated. My hope is that every video reminds you that healing is possible and that understanding relationship patterns can help you move forward with greater confidence instead of carrying the same pain into the future. If today's video helped you see your experience from a new perspective, I'd truly appreciate it if you left a like. It may seem like a small action, but it helps this message reach more people who are silently struggling with the same questions and emotions. And if you want more content about avoidant attachment, emotional healing, healthy boundaries, relationship psychology, and rebuilding genuine self-worth, make sure you're subscribed to Avoidant Decoded. There are many more conversations ahead that can support you on your healing journey. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Which part of today's discussion resonated with you the most? Was there a moment that described exactly what you've experienced? Did something finally make sense after hearing today's explanation? Or has your own journey taught you a lesson that might encourage someone else who is watching? Never underestimate the impact your story can have. Sometimes, a single comment from someone who has already walked this path becomes the encouragement another person desperately needs to keep moving forward. Before we finish, I want to leave you with one final reminder. You were never meant to lose yourself just to make another person feel safe. You were never meant to silence your needs, ignore your intuition, or constantly shrink your personality just to preserve a relationship that required you to disappear piece by piece. Real love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It encourages you to become more fully yourself. So continue protecting your peace. Continue honoring the progress you've made, even if it's happening one small step at a time. Celebrate every boundary you've learned to set, every moment you've chosen self-respect over chasing validation, and every day you've become a little stronger than you were before. Healing isn't about becoming cold or emotionally distant. It's about learning that your worth has never depended on someone else's ability to recognize it. As you move forward from this chapter of your life, keep reminding yourself that healing is not a race. Growth doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't require perfection. Every day you choose to let go of resentment, set healthier boundaries, and focus on becoming a stronger version of yourself is a step in the right direction. Even if your progress feels small, it still matters. Every lesson you learn is preparing you for healthier relationships in the future. Keep choosing yourself. That doesn't mean becoming selfish or closing your heart to others. It means recognizing that your emotional well-being deserves the same care and attention you've always been willing to give everyone else. Stop placing your happiness entirely in someone else's hands. Prioritize your peace, protect your self-respect, and never feel guilty for walking away from situations that constantly drain your energy without giving anything meaningful in return. Keep believing that healthy love exists. Difficult relationships can sometimes make you question whether genuine love is even possible. They can leave you feeling as though every connection will eventually end in disappointment. But one painful experience doesn't define your future. There are people who communicate honestly, respect your boundaries, value your emotions, and choose to work through challenges instead of running from them. Don't let one person's limitations convince you that healthy relationships are impossible. And above all, never lose sight of this truth. You were never meant to spend your life proving your worth to someone who continually failed to recognize it. Real love isn't earned by sacrificing your identity or constantly chasing someone's approval. The right relationship won't require you to beg for consistency, affection, or respect. Instead, your journey is about healing the wounds that once made you doubt yourself. It's about growing beyond the pain that shaped your past and discovering a version of yourself that is stronger, wiser, and more emotionally secure than ever before. Trust your growth. Protect your peace. Keep moving forward with confidence, because the life and love you deserve begin the moment you stop settling for less. Thank you for being here with me today on Avoidant Decoded. I'll see you in the next video.